Okay, hello everybody. This is Miss Kelso, and again, we are going to be doing a story today as part of our mentor text. And we are in honor of October and Halloween and everything. We are going to be reading a story by Edgar Allan Poe. But before we get into the actual story, there's just a couple literary terms that I want to go over, which help you to appreciate the story on a little different level, which is why I want to do it. So, they are irony. There's three different types of irony, and each of them are used within this story very well. So the first one is called situational irony, and that's the one when people talk about irony they think of most often. It is when something happens that is different from what is expected, and not just kind of a, oh, wasn't expecting that, but like, oh, wow, that wasn't what was expected. So kind of a more of a big deal. Some examples would be like a fire station that burns down. Of course, the whole point of a fire station is to keep things from burning down, right? So if it burns down, that's kind of ironic. Somebody sitting there posting on Twitter that social media is a waste of time, which of course you're on social media wasting time saying it's a waste of time. So that would make it irony. So that is situational irony. The next one is verbal irony. And verbal irony is one of those things that I think everybody, especially teenagers, seem to be really good with. It is basically when you say something, but it isn't what you actually mean. So one of the most common examples of this is verbal irony. I just said that. Sarcasm. Sarcasm is a form of verbal irony. So if you're in a class and you're really having a bad time and you say, oh, this is the best class ever, that is verbal irony. You're saying one thing, but you really mean something else. And generally speaking, those who hear you know the difference. It's not like they're confused by it. They can pick up, oh, they're being sarcastic here. Okay, so they don't really mean the actual words they're saying. Another example of verbal irony is exaggeration. So like I've told you this a million times. Well, chances are you haven't really done it a million times. You've just done it a lot of times. So that is verbal irony. Or the opposite of that, which is like understatement. So perhaps, if you're like, oh, it's just a little scratch, when really you cut off your whole foot, that would be understatement. That's not really what you mean. So that is a verbal irony. And then the final one is dramatic irony. And this one, basically think about any time if you're watching a movie, for example, watching a horror movie and the character's like, let's go for a walk all alone in the dark. And we're like, don't do that. The serial killer's out there, That is dramatic irony. Basically, as the audience, we know something that one or more of the characters don't know. And so we're watching them saying, oh, don't do that. You should know better. But they don't, just because we do. We know it, the characters don't. Exactly. So like you're watching a movie about the Titanic and the characters look leaning on the balcony right before the ship hits the iceberg, says, oh, it's so beautiful, I could just die. And of course we know what happened to the Titanic, and we're like, yeah, you're going to. That's dramatic irony. Okay, so those are the three ironies, and throughout this story, you're going to see examples of all of those, which is why I wanted to go over them. But now, on to the story itself. So we are going to be reading The Cask of Amontillado. This is, again, by Edgar Allan Poe, originally published in November of 1846. Okay, and there are some vocabulary in here that are a little difficult, so I will explain the ones that you need to know to get the story. So the first is a cask, is a big old barrel. And Amontillado is a very expensive type of wine. So when they talk about a cask of Amontillado, we're talking about a really big, barrel full of this really expensive wine. So lots of it, okay? And we'll get into why that matters. But so here is the story. I'm going to try to read it to you, and then we'll talk about any vocabulary we need. So here we go. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I have borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, would not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definiteness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes the redresser. It is equally unredressed when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. Okay, so impunity, this is one of the important terms to know. Impunity is the exemption from punishment or freedom from the injurious consequences of an action. So you do something, but you don't have to pay the consequences for it. So very specifically, Montresor is the name of the narrator, the person talking, wants to get revenge on Fortunato. And he wants to do it with impunity. So he wants to get away with the revenge without being punished for it. Okay? But he also wants to make sure that Fortunato knows it is him. Okay? And we're going to see how he does that. And I just want to point out 1,000 injuries that he has borne. But when he insulted him, that's when he vowed revenge. So we don't know what he did, but apparently he said something to insult the narrator, Montresor, and he decides to get revenge. Now, it must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. So immolation is to kill or destroy, especially by fire, or to offer in sacrifice. So it's, for some reason now, Fortunato is acting like he's still, or Montresor is acting like he's still friends with this Fortunato, but in his mind he is really imagining his death. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have a true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practice imposture upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting and gemmery, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect, I did not differ from him materially. I was skilled in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. Okay, so Fortunato knows wine. Okay, he knows the difference between good wine and cheap wine. Okay, and the narrator says he is the same way. I know the difference as well. And I buy good wine whenever I can, right? To show off and stuff. Okay. It was dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season when I encountered my friend. Now, the carnival season is very much like Mardi Gras now. You know, everyone would dress up in costumes, kind of like Halloween, you know, except it was adults dress up in costumes and just have a big celebration, okay? So it is carnival season, and he encountered his friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. And motley is basically his costume. He was dressed like a court jester. Okay? He had on a tight-fitting party striped dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you look today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." And pipe, again, is just another word for a cask. Okay, so he's telling his friend, Fortunato, I got this big old cask full of this great wine. I got this great deal. Except now I'm starting to wonder maybe if it is a good deal. "How?" he said. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible. And in the middle of the carnival?" "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You were not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado?" "I have my doubts." Amontillado? And I must satisfy them. Amontillado. As you are engaged, I'm on my way to Lucchese. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools will have it that his taste is a match for your own. Okay, we don't know who Lucchese is, but we can kind of figure out why maybe he brought this guy up. Because Lucchese, you can tell Fortunato says, oh, well, he doesn't know anything. He can't even tell Amontillado from sherry. He doesn't know wines, right? Why would you go to him? So I want you to think about, why would Montresor bring up Lucchese? Because basically what he's doing is trying to trick Fortunato into saying, oh, you want me. I am the expert. Not this Lucchese guy. You want me. So he's reeling him in, isn't he? It's kind of laying a trap. And let's see if it works. So again, Lucchese cannot tell Amontillado from sherry. And yet some fools think that his taste is a match for your own. Come, let's go. Whither? To your vaults. Oh, my friend, no. I will not oppose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement. Lucchese? I have no engagement. Come. My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They were encrusted with nitre. Let's go nonetheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you've been imposed upon. And as for Lucchese, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado. Okay, nitre is kind of like white, creepy stuff in the vaults. So what is a vault? We're going to talk about that next video and why they're going down into the vaults. But the point is, he told Fortunato he's got this big cask of this really expensive wine, but he's not sure if it's real. He might have been tricked, right? And Fortunato's like, well, I'm going to go check it because I know and I can tell you if you got tricked or not. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave off for today. Thank you.